he's obviously a lot more cognitive than, no offense, Joe Biden, and things are looking pretty good right now. It looks like he's going straight to business. He's signing all the things that's, I
The
think,
fact that you said no offense to Joe Biden just made it like much more offensive
offensive.
to Joe Biden. It was really funny.
Just literally dug my own grave. Yeah, but like so bad, but it's true.
Welcome back to yet another episode of Zillennial Money, and we are not officially back for season 2 yet, but this is another bonus episode, I guess you can say, bonus number 2, and we're still trying to get everything set up to officially launch season 2. So I don't know if we'll do another bonus episode before the official start of the season. But we're getting there. We just have to get some more things set up, but we didn't want to leave you guys hanging for like 3 months with no video. So here we are. Now I promised that we would stop doing the intros because by this point you guys probably know who I am and who everyone else is. My name's Andy. In case this is your first time here, if this is your first time here, go watch season 1. We have like 40 something episodes. So why don't we not waste any more time and jump into today's docket, because we have missed quite a few weeks. So the news kind of stacked up and we're not going to be able to get through all the news that we missed, but we're going to get through a lot of it. So we were about to film an episode a few weeks ago, actually, when the news dropped that Justin Trudeau has announced his resignation. Now, this has been something that's a long time in the making. And, every week, if you guys have tuned into season 1, it seems like every week we have something new to complain about in terms of the Canadian government. And, I won't lie, we're probably not big fans of Justin Trudeau here on this show. So I would I would admit the bias. However, I think that it's not without good reason, right? So personally, I was pretty happy to hear the news that Trudeau is out. Actually, maybe I shouldn't say I was happy, because it was kind of like a mixed feeling, because I would have appreciated the chance for him to lead his party into oblivion, just to put it lightly, right? Like, or to put it more politically correct, I guess, I would have liked the chance for Canadians to vote him out. Because if he just resigned like the way he did, and he's not going to lead the party into the next election, then it's like he can go out and say that, oh, I was never voted out. I quit before you were able to fire me, kind of thing, right? So that's kind of the unfortunate part about Trudeau's resignation. The other unfortunate part is that now he resigned, but he's still going to serve as prime minister until they pick a new leader. So now the Liberal Party, the governing party of Canada, has been thrown into complete disarray. They're looking for a new leader. They're going to have like a really quick leadership race, and we're going to talk about that later, and we're going to go through some of the candidates. But yeah, that's the other unfortunate part, is that Trump has just been inaugurated as the president of the US, and he's threatening tariffs on Canada. And this leadership race also comes at the cost of proroguing Parliament. So if you guys don't know what that means, Parliament is basically just suspended. It's on break until I think it's like the end of March when they come back. So yeah, it's kind of, we don't have like a good functioning Parliament to deal with this massive trade tariff threat from the United States. So it's just a mess all around. And that's kind of the situation that we're in. But before we dive deeper into this, I just want to get some of you guys' initial thoughts on what you thought of the Trudeau resignation. Like, are you happy? Are you sad? Or do you have like a mixed kind of feeling like me? Or just what do you think about Trudeau? Is Trudeau's decision, like, was it the right decision to resign? Did he leave it too late? So, because a lot of people were saying that maybe he should have read into the polls a little bit more and resigned a little bit early. That way, it's better for the country and it's also way better for his party, right? So, did he resign too late? Should he have just gone with it and just called an election and just kind of winged it or try to wing it? What are your thoughts on kind of the Trudeau resigning as prime minister and calling a leadership race and proroguing parliament and all this stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I'll get everything started here. So I think it was like a few weeks ago, like not very long ago, but when news came out that Justin Trudeau resigned, it was like all over so many news sources. Like I even saw it via Six Buzz, if you guys are familiar with that, which is wild, and that's when you know it's huge news. I had a chance to see clips of his, you know how like when you exit a job, there's like an exit interview. There was like an exit let's call it interview as well, but it was the press in front of like the news people and all that. Um, he obviously looked really sad, and in a sense, I do feel really bad. Obviously, he probably talked to a few people and said, "This has to be done. I have to resign. There's no other choice. No one has belief in me no more." And human, I kind of feel really bad for him. But in terms of politics and running the country, I feel like most likely this is probably the best choice. I think he's been breaking down too many walls, and it was only a matter of time for him to, kick the boot or whatever you want to call it and just simply resign. It's great news, I guess, for most Canadians, even per se swing voters, but maybe like super duper liberal voters still wanted him on the top, but we never know. But I personally am okay with him resigning. But I think the ultimatum now is we're still run under the liberal government, and historically, since like the early 2010s, like going into now, the country hasn't been in the best it's been in a long time. And I think, simply put, it's time for like a political shift, and that might be the only way. And that's kind of where I stand politically at this moment in time as someone who's typically voting in one direction. I don't want to make things too clear and obvious, but I think we know where we're going with this. But yeah, it was a total surprise for sure. I was definitely shocked at the time, and I still can't believe it happened. But I think I've heard this around. The job is not done yet, so we'll see what happens in the next coming months. Especially with this tariff news that's coming out soon. I don't know how they're going to handle that properly, and yeah, so on and so forth.
Yeah, before I pass it off to you, Sunil, I just wanted to quickly respond to something that Dom, you said earlier about uh, Trudeau's resignation speech, right? So in this speech, he was mentioning how the reason why he's resigning is because he no longer has the support of the people in his own party. So he refused to take any responsibility for why he's become so unpopular. And I just thought that that was an interesting thing to note. And I just found that kind of bizarre that he's still either unwilling or unable to see why he's so unpopular, right? Because like any normal person would be like, hey, like my support in the polls are too low, and it's clearly that the Canadian people have lost trust in me, and that's why I'm leaving. But no, he was saying that people within his own party is no longer willing to support him, and that's why he's leaving. So I don't know. I just think that this whole situation just goes to show why Trudeau's become so unpopular is because time and time again he's put his own interests and his own party's interests ahead of national interests that affect Canadians. So that's just a note that I wanted to hit on. But I'll pass it off to you, Sunil.
Yeah, I guess my feeling on it is, I mean, it's conflicted, but I wanted to see a resignation for some time. I just think that it kind of feels like the Liberals have been ruling Canada without a legitimate mandate for like a couple of years now, maybe a year or so. It does, and we talked about this last in a few previous episode, but it does kind of feel like, and it was feeling like over Christmas and New Year's that Trudeau was holding Canada hostage almost. Like I think it's just very clear that like Canadians want to change. They want a leader with a strong mandate, especially with the Trump situation and the potential trade war. I just don't think Trudeau's handled U.S. Canadian relations very well. He's also ruined our relations with China and India, so that doesn't really leave a lot of like strong economic powers that are happy with Canada. but it's like really disappointing because it's very much related to Trudeau. And I guess where I'm like disappointed is that like he resigned, but he's still prime minister indefinitely. So like the chapter's not over yet. Like the nightmare is not finished. And I also do think that what we deserve as a country was we deserve to have an election called and to have Trudeau and Jagmeet stand up and have Canadian voters vote them out of power. Like I just kind of felt like we deserved that moment and we didn't get it. And it's a lot like it's almost like at the beginning of this chat we're talking about it as if Trudeau's gone, but he's not. He's still the Prime Minister of Canada. So like when is the nightmare going to end? And I just feel like there's all the Liberals are. I just don't trust them to handle this trade war without putting their personal interests first. I just don't know if the Liberals are motivated to do what's right for Canada rather than to play political optics that better their electoral chances or make them rise in the polls, but not necessarily focus on getting a good deal for Canada. So I just don't trust the Liberal political optics right now, and I don't feel like it's over yet because I don't want to see Justin Trudeau in a podium as the Prime Minister of Canada. I don't want to see him going on CNN. I don't want to see pictures of him at Mar-a-Lago. I don't want him representing Canada, and he still represents Canada. So I'm not happy yet. I'm not satisfied with where we are yet.
Yeah, no, well said. And I agree with you. But just to add to that, besides calling an election, which is obviously what we all want, the alternative without calling an election was for Trudeau to immediately resign and then appoint an interim prime minister and then have them serve and then maybe have an election, a leadership race while the interim person is in charge. So then we'd have like Justin Trudeau, we'd have an interim prime minister, we have the new prime minister if it's not the same. And the interim prime minister will probably not be the one that's running also in the leadership race, because usually that's kind of how it works. Is like the interim prime minister will be like a caretaker person, right? So then we'd have another person, whoever wins the leadership race, become the prime minister. And then we're going to probably have an election right after, because the parties, hopefully if Jagmeet doesn't backstab us again, we're going to have a vote of no confidence, which means that the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre will probably win, in which case Pierre will be the prime minister. So we have a year of like 4 prime ministers. If that was the case, we're already looking at a year of 3 prime ministers because Trudeau's staying on, but then he's going to resign for real when the new leader is on. But then the alternative is that we have a year of 4 prime ministers at a time when the United States is threatening us with 25% tariffs. So I just think that like without calling an election, which is obviously we've established that that's the best solution, but if Trudeau doesn't want to do that, that was the alternative. And do you think that that alternative is better, or what do you think of that, Sunil?
Sorry, can you repeat the alternative?
Yeah, so my question was between like the year of 3 prime ministers and the year of 4 prime ministers, which do you think is better? Like, do you dislike Trudeau so much that you want him to leave so badly that you would rather him leave immediately and appoint an interim prime minister and then have a leadership race, or just do what he did right now?
I think I would prefer the option where he just leaves immediately and puts in an interim prime minister, right? Or an option that you didn't list is that Trudeau is forced to lead the government through another election where he would be defeated. I don't prefer prolonging this nightmare at all. So I guess I'll pick 3 prime ministers in a year versus 4 prime ministers.
Yeah, I mean, so as I said, without calling for an election, I guess this was the best way that it could have unfolded. But obviously, yeah, I agree with you that an election right now immediately would be the best. But unfortunately, that is not the path that Trudeau decided to take. So now we're stuck in this situation, and now we're in a liberal leadership race to find out who's going to be prime minister for like 4 weeks until we have an election, and that person probably, unless a miracle happens, but most likely would get voted out and then Pierre would come in. But anyways, we still have to have this leadership race though. and this leadership race in the Liberal Party is still very important because whoever wins, as I said, will become prime minister, at least temporarily. And let us maybe take some time to go through a few of the options. I'm only going to go through a few because there's quite a few people that's actually put their name forward as a candidate, so we're not going to have time to go through every single one of the contenders and go through their policy positions. But I just want to highlight, maybe the big contenders. Hint, there are only two that people that could possibly win, but then there are some smaller candidates that I kind of find maybe interesting to like shake up the race a little. So the first one that I want to talk about, the first contender is Chandra Arya. So Chandra Arya is a Liberal MP from, I think, the Neopan region, which is near the Ottawa region. He's not one of the top contenders. And, if you ask the word on the street, the consensus is that he probably doesn't stand an actual chance of winning. But I wanted to highlight him because as he's been described by many online political pundits, he has the weirdest grab bag of random liberal policies. And some of the policies I actually agree with, right? Surprisingly, like you probably didn't expect me to say this, but some of his policies actually don't sound that bad. But it's just, and some of his other policies, maybe I would disagree with, but in general, you'll see what I mean in a sec. I'm not going to go through like some of his policies, and you'll see that it's like the weirdest like grab bag. It's like somebody gave you like a liberal red colored bag, and then you just went to the Liberal Party store and grabbed random merchandise off of the shelves with no like rhyme or reason. So first, his policy is he supports the abolition of the monarchy. So he wants Canada to become a republic. So I'm not sure if this is something that I've talked about in the past, but I actually don't think that this is a bad idea. I think the monarchy is kind of archaic, and why do we have to swear allegiance to the king when you become like a Canadian citizen, even though the king is, all the way across the Atlantic Ocean in another country, right? So actually, I think that that's something that maybe I can get behind. And he's actually Chandra Arya is a big opponent of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is something that I think I've talked about a lot in the past, where I think DEI has gone too far, and we need to bring society back to a meritocracy. And you see that a lot right now that's happening in the United States after Trump was inaugurated. So this is a good idea. I think it's not that we don't want people to have diverse backgrounds and stuff, but it's just we shouldn't prioritize that over merits, which is what I find a lot of the times is happening in Western countries like the United States and Canada. So he's pushing back upon that, which is nice. He proposes taxing expatriate citizens, and he would also remove the carbon tax. So that's something that's straight out of Pierre Poilievre's playbook, right? And he supports recognizing Palestine as a state. He's very pro-Palestine, which is kind of rare in, I guess, Canadian politics, because both the Conservatives, the top brass of the Conservatives, and the Liberal Party are pretty pro-Israel, if I do say so myself. He would criminalize displays of terrorists and extremists. So he's like, I support Palestine, but I don't support like Hamas and all that stuff, right? And he wants to position Canada as an energy superpower. Again, this is something that Pierre has actually talked about a lot. So maybe he's actually, in a lot of ways, pretty similar to some of the talking points are similar to what Pierre is talking about from the Conservative side. And he's also against Trudeau's immigration policy, saying that, it's made us dependent on cheap foreign labor, and it's like, not good for Canadian society. This is, again, as I said, a weirdest grab bag of policies from a Liberal candidate. So that's Chandra Arya for you. But let's go through some of the other candidates, the top two contenders that could actually win the Liberal leadership race. that I mentioned earlier are Chrystia Freeland, first of all, who's the former finance minister and deputy prime minister. We talked about her a lot when she rage quit Trudeau's cabinet a few weeks ago or a month ago. And then we have Mark Carney, who's probably a little bit higher in terms of odds on Polymarket. Actually, a lot higher. He's at like 80% odds. So he's the top contender right now to replace Trudeau. And Mark Carney was the former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. So he's has a wide kind of portfolio, and yeah, he claims to be an outsider, but we'll see about that. I don't think he's an outsider. His name is literally on all our money if you look at the bottom corner. But yeah, anyways, Mark Carney is probably going to be the one, but maybe Chrystia Freeland could give him a run for the money. So I'm not going to go through all of each of their policies because it'll take too long. I just want to spend the last bit of my time before I pass it off to you guys to share something fun about each of the candidates' logos. So if you see the picture that I included on the docket, Freeland's logo really looks like Fabricland. If you don't know what Fabricland is a textiles store that sells, well, fabrics and threads and all that stuff for like old moms and grandmas to like make, I don't know, homemade clothes out of, I guess, or blankets. And Mark Carney, his logo is pretty much almost the angles are a little bit different, but it's almost an exact carbon copy. Carbon copy. You see what I did there? It's an exact carbon copy of MetCredit, which is a debt collection agency. And I just wanted to point this out between like the differences or the, I guess, non-differences between the logos of these companies and the logos of the candidates, where it's actually ironically matching their personality. So I can definitely see Chrystia Freeland be the manager of a Fabricland, and I think that job would suit her a lot better than being the finance minister. And I could see Mark Carney being the executive at a debt collection agency a lot more than I can see him or trust him to be the prime minister. But I'm like super biased. That's all I had on the candidates. Now let me pass it off to you guys to make your comments. So what do you think of any of these candidates? What are kind of your comments on who do you think is the best to replace Trudeau? Do any of these candidates propose policies that you like, or are you just like not gonna vote Liberal no matter who wins at this point? Or what are your thoughts in general?
I think first and foremost, the Arya guy, I think he's quite fascinating, and yeah, to my perspective too, I do agree on a lot of the things that he's mentioning, and I think that's quite interesting, coming from the Liberal Party. And then in terms of Christina Freeland, it's pretty funny how like they match so equally, and I think personality-wise, I'm personally not a huge fan of her, and I think if you were to put her on, the top pedestal there, I think it would just be counterproductive because what Trudeau kind of instilled policy-wise is like also kind of a part of her because she agreed on those policies, and then now she's saying all of a sudden she doesn't agree, and she's probably doing it for like a vote ploy. So I don't know if that's trustworthy on behalf of all Canadians. And Mark Carney, I have no opinion of him just because I don't know enough, and I'm not going to say anything. But on a side note, I was taking a look at the $20 bill that I have here. You can't see it because it's like blended in with my background, but on the bottom left of the bill, you can actually see his name here, and it's really cool. So what Andy said was true. So if you do have like any cash on you, go check it out, and his name is actually there. So I'll leave it up to Sanil for the rest because he'll have more credible information. So that's on my app.
I'm not sure if I'll have more credible information exactly, but I guess I'll just say my views. I think Chandra Arya is actually very refreshing. He's like a no BS, common sense, moderate. I mean, dare I invoke this word, but the World Economic Forum, he's like the anti-World Economic Forum liberal candidate, which is interesting because I mean, this is like something that gets like called out as a conspiracy theory, but like it's clear that this like extra governmental organization has a lot of power over our center left um, governance in the Western world in the last little while, and like Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland are both like very much a part of this organization. Chrystia Freeland was literally George Soros's biographer. So I mean, what I mean by this is that like I mean, a lot of people will just call me out as a conspiracy theorist in the comments. I don't care, but I just find it refreshing that there's somebody who doesn't represent this group of individuals, this group of like elitist, institutionalist, expert individuals who do seem to have a lot of influence over Canadian politics and a lot of Western European politics. I think is very interesting that they're even backtracking on the agenda that they have been pushing for their last couple of decades in their own careers. Both of them were big, prominent supporters of carbon taxes and different types of tax policies and what a lot of people will call degrowth type policies, or some people I've actually heard a term called managed decline. I think these kinds of policies are very much associated with these like extra governmental groups that have a lot of sway over how politics is done here. And I think it's interesting that the two WEF candidates are actually backtracking on WEF policies just the slightest. They're still like support a carbon tax, but they want to change it slightly, and that's just clearly transparent that they're trying to run away from Trudeau's record to try to differentiate themselves. And then Chandra Arya is this interesting figure because he's not like, he's an Indian guy. He has an accent. He refuses to learn how to speak French, which is insulting to parts of the country. It doesn't bother me though because I'm an English Canadian. But I think that his policies are refreshing. I mean the ones that I like. Small efficient government. He opposes DEI, which is something that's prominent in the Indian community. Like we're a part of a minority group, but it's not a kind of policy that resonates with the Indian community. So it makes sense to me that somebody like Chandra Arya would be against this. One of the reasons why is India has a long history of implementing these policies these types of policies after independence, and these things weren't good for India. They're actually India still suffers a lot from bureaucracy related to this kind of stuff. It didn't do much to develop India. It just did a lot to slow down India's development. So I don't think that these kind of policies are actually popular among many immigrant groups in Canada, because a lot of immigrant groups came from pseudo-socialist and socialist countries, and they know what happens when government has this much control over things like hiring and that kind of thing. And in terms of the removing carbon pricing, that's very interesting because he's just going against the agenda of his current leader. So I don't know. It's just weird. I just found it refreshing. I'm not going to vote for anybody on the Liberal ticket, and I know that Arya is not going to win. So between Freeland and Carney, I think I feel like it's going to go to Carney just because he does get to be like the new guy. But I think, and I know Andy actually mentioned this in a group chat, but I do believe he's going to be like the Michael Ignatieff character of this cycle.
Yeah, no, there's a lot more that we could say, but let me just expand on the carbon pricing, carbon tax kind of thing, because Sunil, you just touched upon that earlier. Yeah, a lot of the top contenders like Freeland, like Carney, they're starting to backtrack on this carbon tax thing. So Freeland just said that she's willing to scrap the carbon tax, and she's also willing to backtrack on the capital gains tax hike that she was the one that brought forth that idea, or I don't know if it was her idea, but she was the finance minister at the time, right? When she proposed that budget that had the capital gains tax increase, and now she's willing to backtrack on that too. And then in terms of Carney, I think Carney's been trying to navigate this and trying to like snake his way through this issue, but it's a very sensitive issue for Carney at the moment, where he's spoken a lot in favor of the carbon tax, and Pierre is saying that he was actually the architect of the carbon tax, right? Like he was an economic advisor for Trudeau, and he's like known Trudeau for a long time and been like one of Trudeau's closest confidants, and he's been the one that's like kind of proposing all these economic ideas, and Trudeau would go to him because he was the former Bank of England and Bank of Canada governor, so he must know a lot about economics, right? So Trudeau would ask him about all this stuff, and at least the conservatives are saying that this whole carbon tax was his idea from the get-go. And even if it wasn't his idea, he was a champion of it. He's heavily in favor of it. And then now when he has to run for liberal leadership and run for prime minister, all of a sudden, he's a little bit more wishy-washy. He's saying that we'll have to reevaluate. We'll have to look at the ways that we can make it work better for Canadians. It's like, well, it's your idea. If it's not working well, then you had all the time in the world back then to suggest ideas on how to improve it. And you were in the ear of Justin Trudeau for the longest time. So it's convenience that now he's running for prime minister, that all of a sudden he's like, oh, well, we'll look at it. And if you guys don't like it, we'll find ways to fix it and make it better. Or if you guys are really against it, I'm open to canceling it altogether, right? So yeah, it's just very clear pivoting, I would say, to put it nicely, from both Carney and Freeland. And let me just maybe swing back to Chandra Arya for a quick second here, where for Chandra Arya, I think Sunil, you mentioned earlier that you saw this interview. I think we all saw the interview where he just professed to not speak French, right? Or he actually doesn't. He admitted to not speaking French, and he was kind of like not ashamed about it, which was like really surprising because here in Canada, like I'm not sure if you saw, but Christy Clark, who's the former premier of BC, she tried to run for the liberal leadership as well, but then she dropped out. And one of the major reasons, well, she made a mistake and she said something wrong. She lied. She misspoke, which was a lie, about voting in the conservative leadership race, but we won't talk about that because that's another thing altogether. But one of the other major roadblocks to her candidacy was that she doesn't speak French, and she's trying to learn, and she's like, oh, my French is getting better, don't worry, I'll learn. And Chandra Arya, when he went on the CTV or CBC, I think it was, and the host was asking him, it's like, do you speak French? And he's like, no. and then the host is like, well, I don't speak French either, but you're the one running for a prime minister. Don't you think that that's kind of a problem? Like, you need to win seats in Quebec especially if you're a liberal. And then he's like, no, I don't think Quebecers care about language. The Quebecers just want, the economy and the system to work well for him. And, that was like, when I saw that interview, I was really taken aback. It's like, I'm sure Quebecers want the economy to work for them, but to say that Quebecers don't care about language, that's totally the exact opposite of everything I understand about Quebecers. Now, I'm not a Quebecer. I don't live in Quebec, and I've only been to Quebec, maybe a few handfuls of times in my entire life. But yeah, what do you guys have to say to Chandra Arya? Do you think that we'll ever get to a point where someone could get elected prime minister of Canada without speaking French? And do you think that there's credence to what Chandra Arya said, or is he totally just off his rockers and smoking crack or whatever you want to say it is?
I thought I don't know. This is gonna piss off a lot of Canadians, and I saw a lot of Canadians, even English and French speaking Canadians, that were insulted by this. So yeah, I obviously, not knowing French is not gonna be the best electoral strategy for him. But I'm not gonna lie, there was something about it that I found refreshing, because I come from an area of Canada I came from southwestern Ontario, and it's very English. We learn French in school, but it's kind of shoved down our throats. And we do learn to be respectful of Canada's bilingual heritage, but there's a part of me that's like, finally somebody who's willing to say nah, I'm not going to learn French. I just thought that was kind of refreshing. I don't know if Canada's ever going to be a country that moves on from this language issue. It's been going on for so long that I just don't think we can heal from it. But there's just a part of me that kind of like to see somebody stand up to that institutional bullying that's that's in Canadian politics, where anybody who's not bilingual, anybody who can't speak French, is instantly bullied for that. Though I even didn't like how Jagmeet Singh was bullied about it earlier in his career. He did eventually learn it, and he never won any seats in Quebec, but he did eventually learn it. So I don't know. There's something about this like GTA. There's like the GTA culture of this country never really gets represented in Canada. And it's a large part of this country. There's a lot of people who live in that area of Canada, and the strong English speaking culture gets kind of no representation when it comes to our national leadership. So there was something about it that I liked. Not gonna lie. And I think people in the comments are gonna come after me, and I'm not gonna read your comments. So go ahead.
I might take it like a different spin. But I totally agree with like what you're saying. Like it's nice to have like a different side of the coin represented rather than like the main one coin. Like heads is being represented. Normally it's tails kind of business. But think I've made a few trips to like Quebec, specifically Montreal, and I think there's like bylaws to like keep the language prominent and strong. Like example in France, like KFC I think is just KFC, but in Quebec specifically it's like PFC, right? And then the stop signs have like arrête, and not to mention there's like French presence in like other provinces too. So if you're familiar with like Edmonton, Alberta, there's like a small town called Beaumont, and then they have like arrête signs into as well. So there's a lot of like French speaking areas all throughout Canada. And yeah, I do get it. Like I have like no exposure to French whatsoever, and I don't even use it. Like they do shove it down our throats and stuff with French. You barely like know how to say like hello in like a full sentence, but it is what it is with teaching and stuff. But I think the French people are really nice, and the few Montreal friends that I do have tend to know how to speak English and French. And I think there's like a lot of people in like northern Quebec probably that only primarily speak French. So I don't know if it's completely fair to have, like a leadership representative not being able to speak the language, sort of, or like the kind of mother tongue to them. So those like specific individuals who only speak French. But to be fair, though, like Canada is multicultural. It's not like the prime minister knows how to speak Tagalog because I'm Filipino at the caveat. But I don't know. As a kid, I've been raised as French and English are like the two main languages in Canada. So I think maybe I'm traditionalist, but if things were to change, it'd be okay. And I don't know where I'm saying, but I think point being is I also had a chance to see that interview. I don't know if one of you guys sent it. It was hilarious. He was so adamant to like, no, I don't need to learn it. I'm like, holy crap, what a savage, bro. But yeah, I thought that was really funny. I do remember seeing that. But yeah.
Yeah, you know what? After I saw that interview, I actually went and registered as a liberal just so that I can vote for him. Just because, like, I know he's not gonna win, and my vote is not gonna matter. And like for that kind of like, I don't know, bravado, I guess you could say. I think he deserves my vote. I mean, there's no way I'm voting liberal in the general election, but considering that it's free to register as a liberal anyways, I might as well do it, right? So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna vote for Chandra Arya. I just think that like even if there is a tiny like 0.001% chance that he like wins and totally blows up the system, I think that it will be kind of nice, and it'll be also very refreshing to see the Liberals win 0 seats in Quebec. I think that would be a great thing for Canada as a whole, and that's definitely going to happen if Chandra Arya wins, right? And yeah, Sunil, you wanted to say something.
Potentially, Chandra Arya knows he's not going to win, and there's like a contingent of liberals that want to push back against this kind of politics that have dominated the liberals. What I named, like what I call the WEF degrowth type policies. I just think that there are a lot of progressive Canadians and center left Canadians that are kind of sick and tired of everything being about carbon taxes and the world's going to end because of climate change. And I've always been somebody who cared about climate change, but I just think that things kind of got out of hand when we started to like regulate cow farts instead of like trying to electrify our transportation systems. So I just think that maybe there's like pressure in the Liberal Party, and they found somebody who's willing to run and willing to like have that bravado and know he's not going to win, but try to represent that more moderate wing of the party. In terms of yeah, like maybe perhaps Canada should always have a bilingual prime minister if you want to keep the country unified. But I just don't think Canadians should feel bad for being unilingual. I just think I'm kind of sick and tired of that. And I think the Canadians who are unilingual should be proud of who they are, and they should be proud of their little pocket of Canada, whether they speak French, English, an Indigenous language, whatever it is. I just think this whole French language debate is tiring. It's been going on for too long, and I'm sick of it. I do understand the Quebecers want people who represent them and understand their culture, but when it comes down to it, it ends up being very fake. Like when Jagmeet Singh learned French, it's not like he like knows much about French culture. He just had to fake it. So if they want English Canadian politicians to just fake respect Quebec, I guess that's what they're gonna get forever.
I mean, but you have to admit that the Quebecers really care about French, right? So during that interview, when the host asked him, Chandra Arya, like, don't you think that speaking French is important to Quebec? And then he's like, no, I don't think so. and I'm like, I was watching it, my jaw just dropped, right? I've never heard a Canadian politician just say that. It's like, are you sure, bro? Because like, I think they care. Yeah, Dominic.
Oh yeah, just to piggyback, yeah, I agree. It's like faking does suck because originally I'm from Ontario, like the Greater Toronto area, and I recently moved to Alberta, and been talking to a few people here. There's like in their lives, besides like a little French class here and there, zero like French culture like whatsoever. Like to be fair, in Ontario, like if you go to Ottawa, it's like right next to Gatineau. So when you go to I don't know Barwood Market or something, or I forgot that CF mall, like you'll hear like French conversation lingering in the mall, whatever. But here in Alberta, it's like zero French presence whatsoever. So um, it is sort of like in a sense like faking it, and just because you have to conform to like the bilingualism of Canada in a sense isn't fair if you like really weren't raised upon that way, and then you just have to for the sake of doing it. I don't want to sound too insensitive, but I do get it too. It's like there's no presence, so like you basically like forced it down your neck because of like the way everything is. So yeah, I do understand both perspectives.
And maybe one last point before I move on, because I just thought of something that I wanted to add to something you said earlier, Sunil, where you said, you know, the WEF, it's pushing like a degrowth agenda. And I understand, as you said, some people might view what we're talking about as sort of a conspiracy theory, but for the record, I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. There is for sure this group of people called the WEF who holds like, you know, the conference at Davos where they invite all of the world's top leaders, or at least the West, all these like, you know, top leaders and influential people from all over the world. They have a lot of power, undoubtedly, right? I don't think anyone could deny that. And then a lot of these people, some of them are elected heads of state, but a lot of them are also unelected officials, and they get together and they make these like drastic, you know, sweeping changes and plans, and you know, make sure that everybody is on board. And what we've seen come out of the WEF is a lot of what you talked about, Sunil, like degrowth policies, right? You got to reduce your usage of energy, and that just fundamentally doesn't make sense. And I understand that we need action on climate change. I'm not trying to say that, you know, climate change is okay or anything like that. I understand that we need to you know, find ways to reduce climate change, but what they're proposing of reducing energy usage, this is something that Elon Musk has actually talked about a lot, where the real fight is not between the left and the right of the political spectrum. The real fight is between the humanists and the extinctionists. So you refer to them as degrowth. I refer to them as extinctionists. So an extinctionist is someone who holds this deep set belief that humanity is kind of a plague on the earth, right? We're polluting the earth, we're causing all this damage. It'd be better if humanity was wiped out. So their goal, as crazy as it sounds, is they want humanity to be wiped out. And how do they do that? Well, you reduce your energy usage, right? They push these policies that reduce energy usage, because the only way you can use no energy is if you're dead, right? Like if you're dead, you can't consume anything, you can't use energy, right? As long as you're alive, you're using some sort of energy. Your body is using energy right now just by sitting here talking, or watching me talk. So there's no way you can use no energy unless you're dead. So if the kind of, I guess, corollary, however you say that word, corollary of these degrowth policies is that you reduce your energy usage till humanity goes extinct. And I'll give you an example of that, just to make it more concrete. So a lot of these policies have made it into the far left governments of Western countries, and the first one that comes to mind is Germany, right? So Germany shut down their nuclear power plants, just because they were afraid that it's nuclear waste is too, like, it could melt down and it's too environmentally damaging. And then after they shut down the nuclear plants, they realized, oh shit, we still need energy. So they're forced to buy gas from Russia. It was a disaster, right? But their original goal of shutting down the nuclear power plants is because they didn't want the nuclear waste, because they were afraid of it. And that turns out to be degrowth, right? It turns out to be extinctionist. And still the far left in Germany they feel that they haven't gone far enough, where they're openly protesting against Elon Musk, Tesla and the gigafactories and all that. So they were protesting. There was a bunch of people protesting the construction of the gigafactory in Berlin in the first place, because they had to cut down this forest to make room for the factory. And then there were these like squirrels in the forest, and they wanted to protect the squirrels. And it's like, bro, it's an EV factory. Like, it's gonna save the environment a lot of pollution if we switch to EVs instead of burning fossil fuels for our cars. But they didn't want the EV factory because they didn't want to sacrifice this like small group of squirrels to make room for the factory. And then even now, there's like far left extremists that are protesting against Tesla in Berlin, because they're, from their point of view, like, EVs are not enough. They're against EVs. And you know why they are against EVs? Because they want everybody to switch to biking, right? If you're biking, then you're not even using electricity, because using electricity generates, like, you need energy to generate the electricity, right? And some of the sources are dirty because, once again, they pushed out the nuclear power plants. So they're getting it from coal, they're getting it from natural gas, and the far left are going like, okay, that's actually bad too. Nuclear is bad, but we also obviously are against coal. So we just don't want you to drive, right? Just don't drive. Don't have any car. We don't like gas cars. We don't like EVs. Just take a bike. And it's gone to the point where it's just absolutely ridiculous. And it's like the only way to satisfy these people, these like extreme so-called environmentalists, which I don't even want to call them environmentalists because they're not. They're just far left activists. The only way to satisfy the far left activists is for you to die, right? Like, because when you're dead, you can't consume energy. I don't know. Maybe that was a controversial thing for me to say, and I can feel the comments calling me far right fascist already, but I don't care. Now, does anybody want to respond to what I said? Do you guys think what I said is true, or do you guys think that I was just being too far right back there?
Oh gosh, I'll be quick. Yeah, no, I'm totally on board with like what you're saying. It's like, I think as humans, or just like anything in general, we consume some sort of like carbon energy. And I think in the efforts of Tesla, I think, yeah, they're trying to do their best and try to like make life somewhat convenient. But if people are so like extreme and like don't even allow like any consumption whatsoever, like, oh, we just want to bike, or oh, the squirrels, then I think there's going to be like no progression. So at the end of the day, I think something's got to give, and you got to work with the best case scenario while like leaning towards like all like sources. I don't know if that really makes sense. What I'm trying to say is pretty much we're doing what we can like in the present day, and I guess you can't really please everyone, and that's just the way things are. But I think if there's intention, then intention's always good, and if people are trying their best to like be economically or environmentally friendly, then I think you should just like ride with that boat. And if it's like the most economically beneficial way, then that's a bonus too. So
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Andy. I know. I think what you're saying is actually fairly moderate. The way you phrase it with the other extinctionists, I think a lot of people may see that as really like it might be a bit of an extremist point of view. But the thing is that like the result of taking away people's food security and the result of taking away people's energy security does lead to like bad it does lead to bad outcomes for human beings. And the other thing is that there are people within this so-called environmental movement, which I agree with. They're just hard left activists that regularly say that the world would be a better place if humans didn't exist. Like this is not a good way to start policy if you want to serve the public. So their viewpoints are extremist, even though it's kind of become mainstream in left-wing politics. And the last thing I'll say, which I think is a little interesting about managed decline and degrowth policies, is that it's popular in the United States too among the Democratic Party. But in the United States, they have a much harder time implementing these policies. Like they never implemented a carbon tax in the U.S. They never implemented a lot of the policies that were implemented in Canada and in Europe. They did use some regulatory powers to get some things through during the Biden and Obama administration. But these degrowth policies is very much the Obama doctrine that he pushed to the world during the Paris Climate Accord. And what's an interesting thing is that while the Democrats fail to get this policy implemented in America, they successfully get the policy implemented in countries like Canada and Western Europe. So I think the ridiculous thing that we kind of have here is we're kind of living under Democratic Party rule outside of America, while America gets to live under a system where the two parties are actually like fighting out these policies. So like America doesn't implement any of Obama's degrowth policies and Biden's degrowth policies, but Canada, Europe, England, Germany go full on in. So it's like the thought leaders of the Democratic Party control our countries, and I think that's kind of scary.
Maybe some people would consider this as a conspiracy theory, but I don't think it is. It's the WEF who's kind of the ones that an organization that's pulling the strings, or at least attempting to pull the strings among a lot of these global Western leaders, and they've seen a lot of success at implementing some of the changes that they wanted to make. Now, I think that maybe in America, they weren't able to, kind of push their agenda as far as they wanted to, because, America's more decentralized compared to a lot of other countries. Like it's the United States of America, not the Federation of America. So the states have a lot of power. And in America, the states can, implement their own policies on a lot of different things. Unlike in Canada, where it's like the federal government comparatively has more power over how things are run compared to the federal government in the US. So I think that is probably playing a role in the difference. But I think a lot of the blame goes on the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau as well. He's been the one that's leading Canada for the past 9 years, and look where we are, right? So like Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives, are saying, things weren't this way when Trudeau got in charge, and things won't be like this after he's gone. So we just have to look forward to the day when we can actually have an election and then have our voices heard. Now, let me move on to the final kind of little bit on Canadian politics, and then maybe we'll pivot a little. But the final story on Canadian politics is the new EKOS poll. So EKOS is a polling agency. Their CEO's name is Frank Graves. And Graves recently published this poll that was conducted January 17 to 21, so fairly recently, just this past weekend, where this is, a few weeks after Trudeau announced his resignation. So this is post-Trudeau. And according to Graves, the Liberals are making a huge comeback. So all the other polls are showing that the conservatives are leading the liberals by like 20%. So like the conservatives at the other polls, they're polling at like, I don't know, mid 40s at this point, almost 50, not quite, but 45 to 47 to 48, something like that along those lines. And then the liberals are all the way down at like 20%. But here's the poll that Frank Graves just published recently. So apparently, according to this, the liberals are at 32%, which is down only 1% from their performance from their election performance in 2021. So this puts like the conservatives and the liberals almost neck and neck. And under this model, if you were to kind of model out what this poll would look like if it was actually the case, then the conservatives will win a minority government. I think the majority cutoff point is 172 seats, and the conservatives will only win like 150 something seats if this poll was correct. And then the liberals would be not too far behind. They would be over 100 seats, and it would be a conservative minority government if this was the case, if it doesn't tighten up a little more. And, obviously, when this poll was put out, a lot of people are liking this to something that happened in the US. So if you guys remember correctly, or remember back then, we talked about the Ann Seltzer poll from Iowa before the US election. So that one was a poll that was put out by a supposedly A+ rated pollster in Iowa, which is a very conservative state, where Trump won by like, double-digit percentages in the last election in 2020. And Ann Seltzer, who's the most well-known pollster in the state, she put out this poll saying that Kamala Harris was ahead of Trump by 3% in the state. And, that kind of injected a ton of steroids into the Democratic base, and everyone was like super happy. And everyone was saying that, oh, like if an A++ rated pollster is saying this, then Kamala Harris is winning Iowa. And then if she's like winning Iowa, then that means she's winning all 7 swing states as well. And that was totally the opposite of what happened, because she lost Iowa by like 13% in the end. So yeah, it was a huge difference between what the Ann Seltzer poll was saying and the final result. And a lot of people are saying that this poll by EKOS is kind of the same deal, where it's just so far off from any other poll that has come out recently. Like even like polls that tend to stray left a little are still showing the NDP and the Liberals kind of almost neck and neck. Maybe the Liberals are still a little bit higher than the NDP, but they're polling at around the low 20s for every other poll for the Liberals. And then this one, they come in with 32%. So my question to you is, oh, by the way, like people are criticizing Frank Graves, the CEO of EKOS on X, and he's just blocking everyone who's like even a little bit slightly critical of him. So maybe that's not a good sign that he's like very confident in what he's saying, if he's blocking everyone who's just asking for, more detailed info, like how did you exactly get this, right? Like who did you poll? But yeah, anyways, the poll is what it is. And my question to you guys is, what do you guys think of this kind of EKOS versus the world situation? Do you think that there is a chance? You guys are probably not gonna, be super convinced of this poll, but you guys think that there is a chance that this is actually what's going on? Are the Liberals really making a comeback after the Trudeau resignation? Because that's kind of the narrative that Graves has been presenting, right? That Trudeau's gone, all the people that were abandoning the Liberals were just mad at Trudeau, but now that he's gone, now that we have Carney or Freeland, the people are going to come back and vote Liberal again. At least that's the narrative that is being presented. Do you guys think that there's a chance that that's what's happening, or do you think that Graves is totally off his rockers and he's smoking crack? Like, what do you guys think is going on here?
The first thing that comes to mind is that, like, is EKOS working for the Liberal Party? Like you compared it to the Iowa situation. But I don't want to go. I don't want to accuse them of being corrupt, because sometimes you do get outlier polls, and they do have, and sometimes the outlier poll ends up being right. I don't know. I'm not convinced that this poll, being such an outlier, is accurate. It's also just based on my own anecdotal evidence. Like, I know a lot of people who traditionally vote, liberal and NDP, who've never voted conservative, that are still voting conservative. And I asked around this week when I saw this poll, and they're still voting conservative. So it's just like, maybe my sample size isn't scientific. I'm just asking friends, but I'm just not seeing huge movement. Where I will say the chance that the EKOS poll is correct is that maybe the Liberals are pulling away from the NDP, and maybe they're pulling away from the Bloc Québécois and Green Party. Perhaps the lapsed Liberals who were kind of sick and tired of Justin Trudeau came back to the party when he resigned. And so, I mean, there's a chance the Liberals can get 30% with a new leader in the next election. This still puts the Conservatives in majority territory, so that's why where this poll isn't an outlier. But if when the election is called, if EKOS poll is still such an outlier, and then it ends up being like an Iowa situation where the Conservatives end up getting like 48% of the vote, then I guess we should revisit this, and everybody in the world's going to go after Frank Graves. This could end his career, or this could make him the greatest pollster in Canadian history. Who knows?
Yeah, and just to kind of jump in here, this situation is still a little bit different. I know a lot of people are liking it to the Iowa thing, but it's a little different than the Iowa thing in the sense that the Iowa poll was just one poll that came out. I think this was like a few weeks before the election. So it came out right before the election, and then that was just one and done, right? So, but with EKOS, you say that it might be an outlier. Well, if it is an outlier, they've been an outlier for the past like 3 polls that they've done. So I'm just on the 338 Canada poll aggregator right now. The poll that I showed you guys is actually like an average between the last 2 polls that they did, but they did one on January 18th, which was the latest one, and that had the Liberals at 30%. So 1% higher than the average that I showed you guys. And then before that, there was one on January 15th, and then the Liberals were at 28%, and the Conservatives were at 39% for each one of those polls on the 18th and 15th. And then before that, this was January 7th. The Liberals, this was, I think, right after that Trudeau resigned or announced his resignation. The Liberals are at 26% in that poll. And some of the other polls from Ipsos and Abacus that came out the same day had the Liberals at 20% on that day, when EKOS had the Liberals at 26. So yeah, if they are an outlier, they've been an outlier for like 3 polls already. So I don't know. It's a little suspicious, right? It's a little sus. I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything, so don't sue me. But I would think that, maybe somebody slipped him an envelope full of what, right? Like let's just, if this was allegedly, if this were to happen, right? And it's like, the Liberals are down in the polls and they need a reason to inject some steroids into their base and pump them up and get them excited. And Trudeau resigning is such a big event, and they're having this leadership race, and they're trying to put a new face to the party, and they need something stimulants to get them going. There's incentive for a poll to come out where it shows that their strategy is working and the surge is happening, and they're making a big comeback, and an envelope full of cold hard cash might just be the thing that solves the issue. I don't know. Again, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, right? And if Frank Graves sees this video, he's probably gonna block me. I haven't gone through the trouble of trolling him on X, so I don't think I'm blocked yet, but I probably will at some point get blocked. But I'm just saying, right? It's a little suspicious that he's just so far off from everyone else that's putting out polls at the same time as he is. But Dom, what do you think about this situation?
Like I myself as well have asked like sort of like my circle of community or friends and people who normally still vote up to now liberal or like starting to lean towards the conservative end. And that's a notable pattern that I've been noticing, especially from people who haven't voted on the conservative end previously. And ever since this resignation from Justin Trudeau, I don't think that's necessarily have changed. So I don't see that as a reflection of, this poll necessarily. You can argue because of JT resigning, this closer results can possibly happen, but I don't know if it's or it should be as close as this poll is like representing. I think to add on, it is a bit sus, and obviously only time will tell, and then we'll truly know the real result of the election. We can only hope that it ends up being sooner. And I think before, if we're perhaps switching to the American political system topics, I just want to preface by saying, if you guys haven't already, definitely check out the interview with Jordan Peterson and Pierre Polyev. It's a really fantastic interview. And if you haven't, like made up your mind in terms of voting yet, you might want to check out that video, and it might swing you towards the other direction. And maybe this poll will even look a lot different in the near future. But yeah, not advice. You do what you want. So thought it was a good interview.
When it comes to sampling and polls, sometimes it ends up being one pollster who gets it right. So I don't know. But I think, as Dom said and as I said, our sample size is not reflecting this poll does not reflect what our personal sample size is telling us. And you should go watch that interview with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, no, I watched that whole interview. It was great. And I agree with you guys. I have not seen any kind of massive sentiment shifts of people all of a sudden wanting to vote liberal. And it just doesn't make sense for me. Like, if you just think about it logically, right? Like right now, if you were to say, I'm voting liberal, like who are you voting for? Right? We don't even know who the leader is. So it's like, are you voting for Freeland? Are you voting for Carney? Or are you voting for Chandra Arya? Like who is like the liberal leader, right? So it's like, yeah, sure, you might not like Pierre, or you might not want Pierre to become the prime minister, but it's like, if you're committing to voting liberal, you're committing to voting for like any one out of like 10 different people at this point. So yeah, it's kind of like, I feel like there's only a small amount of people that are so loyal to a party that they would vote for that party even without knowing who the leader is. And sure, there are, of course, some people like that, but I don't think it's anywhere near like, I don't know, 32%, 30%, something like that. It's just is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, anyways, if you guys have nothing else to add, let's move on to kind of the final part of tonight's show, which we're going to pivot to talk about American politics now. We spend pretty much this entire show so far talk about Canadian politics, but south of the border, there's a lot of things happening, i.e. the Trump inauguration, right? So this is finally the moment we've all been waiting for, the end of the Bidenocracy. So I was posting on X about how excited I was about the end of the Bidenocracy. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen the movie 127 Hours. If you guys haven't, I'll spoil it a bit for you. The movie's been out for a while, but so it's your fault if you haven't watched it. But it's about this guy who goes exploring the Grand Canyon by himself, and then he takes a fall into kind of like a crevasse, and a big boulder pins his arm against the wall of the crevasse, and he's just stuck there and nobody knows he's there because he's there by himself. And he's like running out of water, he's running out of supplies, and he has to cut his arm off because there's no way to free his arm from the boulder. So he had this little pocket knife, and he had to cut his arm off with a pocket knife to escape from the crevasse. And this was based off of a real story. This actually happened to somebody, and because he cut his arm off successfully in the end, he was able to get rescued, and he lived. And the movie 127 Hours is how long he spent getting stuck. So I was saying to my friends how waiting for the end of the Bidenocracy felt like 127 hours, is that it's twice as painful as cutting your arm off with a pocket knife. So I'm glad that we all made it. Congratulations. Give yourselves all a pat on the back for surviving 4 years of the disaster. And if I sound really biased, that's because I am, but you'll soon see why. Because you'll see. Okay, so on his first few days or so, Trump issued a ton of executive orders. And we're not going to have time to go through even the majority of them because there's a lot. But let me just kind of present you guys with some of the highlights. So one of the directives is to crack down on DEI. So we talked about it earlier in the show, and this is kind of the big swing against DEI and in favor of meritocracy, which I'm totally for. But I just found something really funny on X that I wanted to share with you guys. So this is a photo from the kind of career website, or the About Us section of the ATF, which is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, like regulatory authority in the U.S. government. And this person, she was the chief diversity officer before Trump came into office. And then magically over the past week, she went from the chief diversity officer to a senior executive. As soon as people found out that Trump issued executive orders to get rid of all the diversity and inclusion efforts and programs that are in the US government, how convenient. But it's just kind of funny to see somebody try to pull this off in real life, where they just like give themselves a new title and, you know, pretend that they weren't the chief diversity officer in order to avoid getting fired. But, you know, the all-seeing eye of the internet, you can't hide from that. I just found it funny because this is like when you're playing Grand Theft Auto. Like, I'm not sure if you guys ever played Grand Theft Auto, but when you're playing Grand Theft Auto, like the game, the police are chasing after you. You go inside a house, and then the police are like, "Oh, who are we chasing again? Never mind." And then when you come out of the house, the police don't recognize you anymore. So this is like the real life equivalent of that, where you were the chief diversity officer before Trump came in charge, and then when Trump came into office, you were like, "What chief diversity officer? I was never that. That position didn't exist. I'm a senior executive." Right? Like, do you guys think that this trick is going to work in real life? Like, come on, right? It's funny to see somebody even try this, but here we are, right? So Trump has gone after a lot of these diversity officers, I guess you can say, and fired a lot of them already. And yeah, this person, Lisa, unfortunately, will probably not escape getting fired because because the internet saw this trick right through. So there's that, and then we can talk about the border stuff a bit, right? So the Trump has launched a crackdown on the border, and specifically with regards to this one, he's also renewed the tariff threat against Canada. He said that, you know, if we don't negotiate with him and do better on the border and all this stuff, then he's going to impose 25% tariffs starting February 1st. So we're recording this on Thursday, January 23rd. So they still have about a week to go until the tariffs start. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe there's still time to work out a deal. I don't have much faith in our government right now because we have a lame duck prime minister and we don't have a parliament because it's prorogued. Whatever, right? But we'll see how it goes. And at least as of right now, there's been a big kind of national effort to try and get all these premiers together, which is like our equivalent of a governor for our provinces, right? Get all the premiers together and launch like kind of a program to implement retaliatory tariffs if Trump implements these tariffs against us. But even that has kind of hit a snag because the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and the Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe have both said that they're not for like, you know, one for one kind of trade war against the US. They're much more in favor of, you know, talking it out. But Doug Ford and Trudeau and a bunch of other premiers are kind of more in the camp of, oh, we got to go hardline and go, super hard in countering these tariffs. So we'll see which one works better, or if it's needed at all. Hopefully, we don't get into a trade war at all. But as I said, I don't have much hope. And what's happened just yesterday was that Trump gave a pardon to Silk Road founder Ross Ulbricht. So if you don't know who Ross Ulbricht is, or Silk Road was a website that it was kind of like eBay, but you can sell drugs on it. And because of that, the U.S. the government at the time launched a huge crackdown and shut down Silk Road and seized all his Bitcoin. And Ross, being the founder of this website, he was he got the book thrown at him. Essentially, he got consecutive life sentences, and he was going to die in prison if he wasn't given a pardon, because he got sentenced to over 100 years in prison. But what Trump decided to do was give him a full pardon. Now, there's actually some kind of confusion between pardoning someone and giving a commutation. So if you commute the sentence of someone, you say that, oh, this person served enough time, and we think that the punishment has been enough. We don't want him to serve the rest of the sentence. So you just get kind of the rest of your term, the rest of your prison term chopped off. So that was one option, but another option was full pardon, which is what Trump gave, surprisingly, pleasantly, to people who support Ross and Bitcoin and all this stuff, which was a full pardon, which means that you shouldn't have never been sentenced for this crime in the first place. Is kind of what a pardon is, right? So it's a lot of people were surprised that Trump gave a full pardon, and Trump actually published a statement, which I'll read because it's really quick. So he said that I just called the mother of Ross William Ulbricht. He spelled his name wrong, but it's the thought that counts. To let her know that in honor of her and the libertarian movement, which supported me strongly, it was my pleasure to have signed a full and unconditional pardon for her son, Ross. The scum that worked to convict him were some of the same lunatics that were involved in the modern day weaponization of government against me. He was given 2 life sentences plus 40 years. Ridiculous. Right? So I think a lot of Bitcoiners and especially libertarians would heavily agree with Trump here. And it was a nice kind of surprise to Bitcoin and the libertarian movement to see Ross get this pardon. And here you can see a photo of the first photo of Ross when he got out, and he does look much older than all the photos that I've seen of him online, because it's been, well over 10 years, I think, since he was sentenced to prison. So I'll take a pause here and kind of throw the questions back to you guys. So what do you guys think of the first kind of wave of executive orders that we just talked about? Pardoning Ross, crackdown on DEI, threatening tariffs against Canada and Mexico, and implementing border securities, sending troops to the southern border. What do you guys think of all these executive orders? Do you guys think that these are kind of the changes that America needs? Or do you think he's going too far with some of them? Or are you satisfied with what's going on so far? And just what are your thoughts on any of the things that we talked about so far?
Yeah, no, I've been seeing a lot of talks of tariffs being implemented in the 1st of February. And then from my understanding, I believe Danielle Smith was invited to the inauguration and was trying to find ways to, sort of work things out. I'm familiar with that. I think that's what happened. But I think it's so funny how Lisa here had to switch her name just to keep her job. I think it is like the GTA thing. It's like you have 5 stars and then you go somewhere that's like starless, and then all of a sudden you have 0 stars. The cops don't recognize you. I think that's hilarious. By the way, super funny and stuff. The Ross, I might pass on it just because I don't. It's a gray area. I don't want to talk about it yet, but I think the things I do want to talk about are like the borders down south in Mexico. I think the moment he was back in office, he like really made it his mission to like enforce that again. I think I'm hearing about deportations in the talks and stuff, and like a lot of families are in like unfortunate positions. But um, yeah, it might sound like an asshole or like bleep it if you want that word, but I think housing costs and et cetera and so forth are getting really expensive, and all these like cost of living things are going a bit crazy. So maybe reducing the amount of overall population in America is probably the best call as of right now. So sorry for these families, but I think until there's economic recovery, I think it's probably what's needed, so to speak. But I think what else did I hear? I heard something about like the WHO organization, like him opting out of something. I don't know complete details about that, but I think bro went to work. I was watching videos of him like President Trump, here's the executive order, yada yada, and he had like a full pile of like different executive orders. I'm like, holy bro is going to work. So I will say it's been a pretty insane few days so far, and then um, we'll see what happens like going forward and in the United States government, and even what's going to happen up here in Canada too. Only time will tell. And yeah, it's been a shocker for sure, like these past few days. So.
I feel like Trump got more done in like 3 days than Biden did in his entire 4 years, right? Like we just the pile of executive orders. And let me just add one quick thing before I pass it off to Sunil, since you brought up the border crisis thing and the deportations that Trump is implementing. I obviously like the liberals are kind of upset about this. It's like, oh, Trump is being a dictator. How could he? He's deporting people, and it's like, isn't that what like the Nazis did to the Jews? Like, all type of crazy stuff are being thrown around. But if you look at what's happening, he's going after people who are in America illegally, right? They came over the border illegally, and he's starting with the people that are criminals, right? So like the people who have prior offense convictions and are gang members and stuff like that. So I saw this video on Fox News where this gang member who was originally from Haiti, who came to America illegally, who had like, I think they said like 17 prior violent crime convictions, and he was still out on the street somehow. He was getting arrested and deported. And then all the time when he was getting shoved into the police car, he was just yelling curses and yelling like swear words. And he's like, F Trump. I love Biden and I love Obama. And he was praising Biden and praising Obama because it's very clear that it was like he's attributing to his ability to stay in America due to Obama and Biden's policies. And then once Trump came in, he launched this crackdown, and that's why he's getting arrested and deported back to Haiti. And I just saw this video of Tom Homan, who's the border czar, the new border czar, talking about this. And then they played a clip of the guy, like of the gang member, yelling like, "I'm not effing going back to Haiti." And then Tom Homan's like, he's definitely going back to Haiti. Like it was just the most like boss moment ever. And this is like kind of the thing that America needs, right? I don't want to sound heartless. Obviously, I don't want like people are framing this as Trump sending the Gestapo to take kids away from families. That's not what's going on, right? A lot of these people are violent criminals, and if you are finding yourself disagreeing with the deportation of these gang members, like I said before, put some skin in the game, right? So if you disagree with them, ask yourself, do you want to maybe take out your living room and convert your living room into a temporary shelter for these gang members, so that like if Trump came to you and it's like, okay, let's make a deal, I won't deport these people if you give them a place to sleep in your living room. Like how many Democrats would actually say yes to that, right? So I think that a lot of people are saying stuff for ideological purposes or just to progress left-wing ideology, but they don't actually want to stand up for it if there are actual consequences. It's like they're shouting that, oh, like how can you be so heartless and deporting people? But the truth is, they want to live in safe communities just like everyone else, right? Democrats, Republicans, everybody wants to live in safe communities, and it's like, you know, you can complain about deporting violent criminals who had prior convictions, but I bet you don't want them in your neighborhood. So that's what I'm saying, right? You got to have skin in the game. But anyways, let me pass it off to Sunil. I've droned on enough about this issue. I want to hear what you have to say about all this, you know, executive orders and all this stuff.
I'll start with DEI. I think DEI is just one of those policies that it's well intentioned. There's nothing wrong with what people want to achieve. They want to achieve representation of different people of color, women. The idea of maybe having like an indigenous person, or you know, like there's a lot of things like I can get behind in terms of like the intentions. But once you start turning these kinds of policies into like administration, it starts to become a policy grift for me. And then when I think that when things start to become like a grift, when it's like people are experts of diversity, which is like, how do you become an expert in diversity exactly? I don't exactly know how that happens, but that's when the low integrity characters start coming in. And like, it's just when I see this individual at the ETF having their like nameplate online change and like thinking that nobody's gonna notice. It's like, who are these people? They have zero integrity. They're not willing to stand up for their own ideas. They're not willing to get fired. They're not willing to say, I stand for DEI, I want to get fired. So I just think that you get a well-intentioned idea, you get people in the policy world workshop it for years, and then you end up getting these low integrity grifters end up getting the jobs to implement these ideas, and they do things like this, which is insulting to the voter to do something like this. Like the people who represent ATF, they are supposed to be serving the voters. They're not supposed to be hiding things like this. They're supposed to have integrity, and we're supposed to trust them. So how do we trust people who act like this? So that's what I'll say about DEI. I think there has been a mandate for.
Sorry to cut you off, Sunil, but you just reminded me of one thing. So I don't have any statistics to back this up. It's just purely anecdotal. But what I've noticed, just anecdotally in my life, is that all the people that I know that are ethnic minorities here in Canada, and I'm sure it's similar in the US as well, all the like ethnic minority people are against DEI. And the people that I find are the most in favor of DEI are white folks. Like, I don't know, like, if there's, like, I'm just saying, right? Like, I'm not trying to, like, single out any racial group or anybody, but this is just a trend that I've noticed. And it's all these, like, you know, suburban white liberals that are like super pushing the DEI and all the and DEI is supposed to be more beneficial if you're an ethnic minority, and all the ethnic minorities are like, whoa, like what are you doing, right? Like, I don't want you to give me special treatment. You really don't have to do that. It's like when you go to your grandma's house and she's insisting that you eat like a fourth meal and you're like super full. You're like, you really don't have to, and your grandma thinks that she's doing you like a favor. It's like, oh, like, I don't want you to go hungry, like finish this. And you're like, no, I'm gonna throw up if you feed me any more food. It's kind of like that feeling, right? Where all the ethnic minorities are like, stop it with the DEI. Like, we don't need it, we don't want it. I appreciate the effort, I appreciate you thinking about us. And all the white folks are like, no, like you're black, you're Asian, like, here, have more benefits. You're a woman, like, you know, let me give you, you're a black Asian woman who's also gay. Let me give you like all the benefits. Let me just like take out $500 from my wallet and stuff it in your pocket. Like seriously, guys, like, you don't need to do this, right? Like, what do you think, Sunil? Do you think that what I'm saying has merit? Or like,
is this staying on the pod, or is this gonna stay?
This is gonna stay.
Oh my
I think it should. I think it's an important topic, actually, because I think that the white folk that support DEI with a passion are very well intentioned. I don't think they're bad people. I think they want to do good. I just think that they should listen to people like us who say, my success, I don't want to be successful because you gave me like a charity thing. Like, I don't want to be promoted out of charity. I want to be promoted because I earned it. And it undermines my success. If half my colleagues think that I only got promoted because I'm a brown guy, it's not cool. Like, I don't want that. I don't want to be. I'd rather people be racist against me and not give me the job than for me to feel like I only got the job over more qualified people because I was brown. That doesn't, and the thing is that I may have gotten the job because I'm more qualified, but there's going to be people in the office to now think I only got the job because of DEI policies. So please, I know it's well intentioned, but like colored folk in this country do fairly well. Like we're very successful. I could say that for my community at least. Indian community in this country is successful. We do well. We don't need people to give us this ladder to get to the top. We will just work hard and get there ourselves. That's all I have to say. But I do not think the people who support the policy are bad people. I think they're very well-intentioned people, and there's a part of me that's conflicted where it's like I feel bad telling these people that they're kind of being silly because they're doing it for me. All I say is don't do it for me. Um, so that's my view on DEI, and I do find that there are a lot of people of color who are, especially men, who are pushing against it recently.
Like I guess we're keeping this on. Yeah, what's my opinions about it? I think yeah, I think I don't need any extra brownie points. For example, like if you're doing a 100-meter dash against Usain Bolt, I'd want to face him like fair and square. Like I don't need to start like the 50-meter line, like just because I'm Asian, and I have like a disadvantage because I don't have the same, like genetic material as like Jamaicans per se, because they are like technically the fastest people in the world. So an even shot towards anything is probably more beneficial than us than getting that extra treatment. So I do understand that too. But don't cancel us. Holy crap. But yeah.
No, I think what we all said was true, right? Like, and I totally agree with everything you guys just said. It's just like and again, I agree with you, Sunil, that I think that the people who made these DEI policies, they're trying to do their best. They're trying to push back against racism. But what they don't realize is that by pushing back so hard against racism, they like overcorrected. And like it's like like the integer overflow like problem in computer science where like the number gets too big and it wraps around and it becomes the minimum possible number. It's like they're trying so hard to not be racist that they became racist. Like they became the villain that they're trying to destroy, right? Because DEI, if you push it to the extreme the way that it has been, it's like it's just basically at the fundamental level treating people differently based on their race, right? Like is that what it is, right? Like if there was a Harvard case where these like Asian students were suing Harvard because Harvard was saying that, or they weren't saying it, but it was pretty clear that there were too many Asians in the eyes of the admission officers at Harvard, because Asian students tend to have higher, SAT scores and all that stuff. It's like, oh, we can't have that many Asians. We need more racial balance. So if you're Asian, then we're gonna like kind of dox you a little bit in terms of the points. And then if you're Black or Hispanic or Aboriginal, they call them Native in America, you get boosted, right? So it's just it's treating people differently based on race at the end of the day, right? And I don't think that that's a path that we want to go on. And that's all I'll say about DEI. And I'll pass it back to you, Sunil, for your opinions on either what I said, or you can move on to the next topic about.
Yeah, I think you're right though when you said the word overcorrection. It's an what DEI was an overcorrection, and some people are arguing what Trump's doing is an overcorrection. Maybe it is. I don't know. I think there's probably room for some policies that open representation to other people. It's just when it gets instituted like this, and then you're saying that Asian people can't get into Harvard, and it's like, what the hell was the point of this policy if now you're saying that some people of color can get into Harvard and some can't? Or if all of a sudden some like grifter online starts to say the Indian people are oppressor class because Hindu Indians are economically in a better spot than other people in the country. Like, what's the point of this policy if you're going to like start categorizing everybody and then it just becomes racist? And That's kind of what happens. And it was an overcorrection, and now what Trump's doing might be an overcorrection, but there is a backlash, and he has a mandate to do it. So I don't know what else to say about it, but like, don't show so much sympathy for us. It's okay. We're gonna make it. We, people like us do well in this country. So like, you don't need to help us that much. Is all I have to say. But I appreciate the thought. And am I good to move on to the next topics? Okay, cool. So the next thing is the next thing I think was border security. Um, Trump has a clear mandate to deal with the border security and the immigration crisis. I think that seeing pictures of families being ripped out of like or crying at the border is heartbreaking, but I think that the issue is that these people who put out these imagery are always trying to weaponize sympathy. And when it comes down to it, laws are laws. You can't just walk into a country and live there without official status. There, like my whole family, I have a large family in Canada, and they all immigrated to Canada between 1968 and like 2005. Like I had people that came in the 90s. Nobody skipped the line. Everybody went through the process. Everybody went through the pain of Canada's immigration system. Everybody had to go and work bad jobs in order to get their status. And then when we see people be able to skip the line, that hurts us. That actually hurts us that like that the system isn't fair. So if you're going to come to America or Canada illegally, I'm sorry, you broke the law and you have to get deported now. And that's just how it's going to be. And it's going to be heartbreaking to watch some of it. It's going to be harsh to watch. And but nobody like Biden didn't have to let 16 million people flow across the border. He could have like controlled the border. He could have done something. He didn't have to open up. There's already asylum laws in place. Countries like Canada and America take in so many refugees on a per capita basis in the last 50, 60 years. Like we're countries that got built on people coming here seeking asylum. We have asylum laws. Use the asylum laws. And if you still don't qualify, I'm sorry. That's just how the system works. Some people just don't make it through the system. I don't know what else to say. I do believe Canada should take in refugees. I just don't believe that half the people that are claiming asylum in this country are actually legitimately claiming it. And that's kind of what I have to say. And I feel the same way. I think the same is happening in the United States. So I think that in the end it's heartbreaking, but I think Trump has a strong mandate to do it. In terms of like Canada's angle on this, I really hope he doesn't institute tariffs on February 1st. I think it'd be devastating to Canada. I think Daniel Smith is actually correct that Canada is going to get its ass kicked if we do this. We just don't have the economic power to fight the world's superpower. I also think that Canada should take our border security seriously. So if Trump is asking us to take our border security seriously, like it shouldn't be a threat of a tariff that makes Canada act wisely on these things. So that's kind of what I have to say about that. Uh, and oh, and the last thing I'll say is that I mean, like I'm a Canadian. I want the Liberals to like win this fight with Trump and not like and have no tariffs come on Canadian goods on February 1st. But my fear is that the Liberals are not acting in good faith. I think they want to fight because they think the fight's going to help them electorally, and I really hope I'm wrong about that. But that's my fear when it comes to that policy. I don't know if the Liberals are acting in good faith right now. I think they want to fight. I think they want this tariff battle because I think that in their kind of twisted mind, they believe that this is going to help them electorally. So I really hope I'm wrong about that, and I hope they prove me wrong about that. And then in terms of the Ross, the pardons at Ross, I was actually surprised that it was a full pardon and not commuting his sentence because if we are technical about this, he was facilitating drug trafficking, and those charges. You can get 20 years in prison for facilitating drug trafficking. There was allegation that was used by the prosecutors that Ross was actually trying to put a hit on people who were involved in the Silk Road, which a lot of people, but they never charged him for attempted murder or a conspiracy to assassinate or whatever he was trying to do. So the pushback has actually been that the prosecutors staged a character attack on Ross, so he was unpopular to the public, and then they handed him 2 life sentences plus 40 years in prison without ever charging him with conspiracy to murder. So I don't know what's going on in that case, but what I will say is that I don't think, first of all, I'm a libertarian, and I don't think drugs should be illegal. I don't think that these laws work. That's my personal views. I know a lot of people disagree with me on this. Uh, in terms of Ross committing crimes, he did commit crimes technically. If you believe the Ross's drug trafficking crimes should get him 20 years in prison, I respect your opinion, but I don't believe he should serve 100 years in prison for it. I think it's ridiculous that how the state power was used against Ross. I think that several layers of the U.S. government acted in coordination to take down Ross in this way and to make an example out of him because they wanted to make an example out of anybody who dared to make an illegal marketplace that used Bitcoin. So I think that's why freeing Ross is very important to Bitcoiners because the United States government tried to use their state power to destroy a person's life to make an example out of him to put fear in the minds of Bitcoiners, and I think that in the end, I'm glad he was pardoned. I think that it's an important part of the process of healing as we push this technology forward that's going to help humanity, that we do commute and pardon the sentences of the individuals who are serving massive and unfair sentences in prison. And I think one of the worst things that can happen to an individual in a modern democracy is when the state comes after one individual with that much force. It is one of the worst things that can happen to a person.
I was just gonna add, like, you know what's ironic about the Ross Ulbricht thing is that if they had just, not thrown the book at him and gave him like 100+ years, if they were just like, hey, you were facilitating drug trafficking, and we're just gonna give you 20 years because that's what the usual punishment is, I don't think it would have whipped up like enough really like outrage and support for him to like make such a big push for Trump to like have to make a campaign promise to free him after he was elected. And I think it's only been like 12 years since he was thrown in prison. So if he had got sentenced to 20 years, he would actually still be in prison right now. And he would be in prison for 8 more years if he hadn't gotten like the pardon, which I would argue he probably would not have if he only got 20 years. So like by going super hard and giving him like over 100 years in prison, it actually caused Ross to be freed a lot earlier than he quote unquote should have. And even like the should have, I guess, is like, could be argued because it's like some people don't think that he should have gotten any jail sentence at all, right? But and I think you could certainly make an argument for that because it's like, in America, you have murderers and rapists getting way longer than 20 years for that, right? Or way shorter, I mean. So it's like, it's definitely seems like it's super unfair to have given him such a long sentence. And if they had just tried him normally, like, and instead of trying to go after him, he would still be in prison probably, right? Like, am I wrong, or what do you think about that, Sunil?
Yeah, I think that you did a better job making one of my points for me, actually, is that, yeah, like if they just charged him for what he did that was legal, they could have put him in jail for 20 years and they could have made an example out of him in a way where he probably wouldn't have gotten pardoned. But I don't think it's appropriate for the government to attack one individual citizen the way they attacked him. It is so dystopian. It is so scary, like imagining being in that position. And he was like this 20-year-old kid. He just like was being a kind of a silly idiot. I mean, it was brilliant what he created in some sense, but then he like is almost like he's a kid. Like just leave him alone. Like, let him. Like he made a mistake. Throw the book at him to a point, but like this is the weaponization of state power, and it is that scares me. So I'm glad there were so many libertarians who stood up and fought back because it was completely inappropriate how he was treated. It was a miscarriage of justice.
That's pretty much all I had. Maybe one last final tidbit before we wrap up. I just saw this while scrolling through X. is that so far, I know it's only been like a few days since Trump began his second term, but so far, so good for Trump. So during his first term, his all-time high approval rating was plus 0.1%. So it's like net approvals, right? Like approve minus disapprove. Like that's the highest he ever got, was pretty much dead even, 50-50. Half the country liked him, half the country hated him. Maybe like a small proportion of people had no opinion, but like, you know, it was, America was like completely fully divided, exactly down the middle. And now for the highest point in Trump's first term. And that was the best record he ever did in his first term. And today, just a few days after his inauguration, his net approvals is at plus 13%. So night and day difference. I don't know if it's anything like super good that Trump is doing that people really like him now, or if it's the Democrats just, you know, totally making a mess of things and throwing out the baby with the bathwater and, you know, making it easy for Trump. I would argue is probably a little bit of both. But yeah, I mean, what do you guys think of this approval rating number? And are you optimistic for the next 4 years for America?
Like my overall like thoughts on everything, I think he's obviously a lot more cognitive than, no offense, Joe Biden, and things are looking pretty good right now. It looks like he's going straight to business. He's signing all the things that's, I think,
The fact that you said no offense to Joe Biden just made it like much more
offensive.
to Joe Biden. But no, it was really funny.
Just literally dug my own grave. Yeah, but like so bad, but it's true. But yeah, he's getting straight down to business. I actually want to mention this too as well. Like on the topic of straight down to business, I don't know if you guys have seen the video already, but there was like a European political MP, and he was like, I think the chat was pretty much about Greenland, and then Donald Trump wanting to buy Greenland, and then basically it was just like, F off. There's no way we're doing that. This is crazy. We're not. Greenland isn't for sale. This is not going to happen. So if you guys haven't seen that video, like check it out for sure. I just think like, you know, like the current news and everything that's going on right now is completely nuts. Obviously, like I've said before, only time will tell, and then we'll see. But it seems like so far so good. And oh, another thing too. I'm like really happy for JD Vance. Like I know we didn't really mention him yet, but he has like a show or like a movie, Hillbilly something. It shows like a depiction of his entire life, and he didn't come from a really good place. And for him to be like the vice president too as well. I recently saw a video of him just seeing the Oval Office for the first time. He's very like an intellectual person, speaks really well. So I think congratulations to JD Vance too as well. Like props to him for sure. I think again we'll see what happens, and yeah, thought I mentioned those things as well.
Yeah, such an upgrade from Kamala Harris, night and day difference. Now, Sunil.
So I mean, okay, I mean, like, first thing I'll say is that the themes of Trump's executive orders have been things like DEI, degrowth, like getting out of the Paris Climate Accord. I think there's actually been a lot of like bipartisan backlash against those things. So that reflects why people are very happy about these moves, because it's actually, if you talk to people, they're actually, even if people supported these degrowth policies, eventually people had buyer's remorse. So I think that people are very excited about some of these executive orders because there is actually bipartisan backlash. The other thing is that the Democratic Party did such a good job, like characterizing MAGA 1.0 as a bunch of racist, hillbilly, uneducated, resentful assholes, and they did a good job finding like specific individuals within MAGA 1.0, like Steve Bannon, to represent that mentality. And it's within the interest of those same people on the left in the US to characterize MAGA 2.0 as the same as MAGA 1.0. But it's actually very different. It's a huge political realignment. Like, for example, People criticize the billionaire oligarchs that showed up at the inauguration. The one thing I'll point out about the individuals, the billionaire oligarchs who showed up to celebrate Trump's victory, they're all Democrats. So I think that what's happening right now is that MAGA 2.0 is actually a very strong bipartisan political coalition, and that is starting to be reflected in Trump's polls. And I'll make a prediction here that by sometime in the spring or summer, Trump's approval rating will be about 65 to 70%.
That high, eh?
I think so. Yeah, I think it will be.
On that bombshell, we'll have to revisit that at a later date. And at that point, season 2 of Zillennial Money will have been well on its way. So we'll revisit that prediction then. So on that bombshell, it's time to end the show if you guys have nothing else to add. If not, let me pass it off to Dom to do the outro as usual.
All right, haven't done this in a minute, but I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. It's been a while for us, so it's nice to, clean off the rust off of our car, so to speak. And yeah, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Check out this channel. We have a clips channel too. And yeah, bye. Peace out, guys.
It's great to be back. I think we probably said a lot of thought-provoking things that triggered a lot of people here. I'm sorry if you're triggered, but I think this is going to be a year of triggering for a lot of people. So get used to it.
Well, it's going to be a controversial ride for the next season 2. I think the gloves are off for season 2.
Please don't cancel us.
We won't get canceled, right? Right?